let's look at some of the more common features that we'll need to know in order to work with the file system on iOS. The very first thing you need to be aware of is that your app is sandboxed. What does that mean? Well, that means that your app has its own little container, its own little sandbox, if you will, and it cannot access anything outside of that sandbox. So your app cannot go to another app's container and see what's available there. It also, if it wants to get photos and music from the iOS system, has to ask it using the Apple version of that request. The other thing you have to know on iOS is that all paths are case sensitive. Therefore, lowercase does not equal uppercase when you're defining a path. If you're coming from the classic .NET world and you program on Windows, this will come as a surprise, and most of the time as a nasty surprise in the form of a crash. You have to get the case right. Now there's another little gotcha here, is that if you get the case wrong on the simulator, there won't be a crash. But if you get it wrong on a device, there will be an exception thrown. So just be aware of that, and always, of course, test your app on a real device. Then we need to look at the path separator. So if I had files /something /something, on iOS the separator is a / and not a / like you would have on the Windows operating system. Therefore, if you want to create a directory path or a file path, it's always best to use the system.path.combine function, because that will take into account the OS that you're running on and make your code more portable. This is a major gotcha. Do not try to write to your app folder. So over in the image, you can see your bundle container and you can see your data container. Always write your data to the data container in Documents, Library, or Temp. Do not try to write it to myapp.app. .app is simply a folder in and of itself. But if you try and write to it, you're going to invalidate the signature on it, which means that your app will not run. You probably won't even get past Apple review with an error like that. Finally, in concert with that, store your files in the Documents folder of your data container. So over in the image, you can see Documents, Library, and Temp. Pop it into Documents, and if you so wish, you can turn on iCloud backup for the Documents folder, which means that Apple will automatically back up whatever's in there, and when your user changes device, they can have their info available there too. If you put your data into Library, I wouldn't advise it because that's a special use case and you'll hardly ever need to use that. Don't put your data into Temp unless you want it deleted fairly often. iOS does the occasional sweep to free up space, and the Temp folder of each app is the prime target for that sweep. So if you're caching images, then sure, by all means, put them in the Temp folder. Okay, that pretty much sums up the iOS file system structure. It's quite simple because we are sandboxed and we cannot play in any other app's sandbox.